This is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and in this video I'm going to continue reading through Homer's Iliad, the English translation by the English poet Alexander Pope, which we study in the Academy's English Literature 1 course. It's part of our English literature course because even though we're reading Homer's Iliad, we're reading it in English translation, so technically it's English literature, and we're also appreciating the poetry of the translator, Alexander Pope, one of the greatest of the English poets, and this lesson is intended for students studying in that course. We're going to be reading Book 5, as I said, and this is a lengthy book. This is a longer book. I'm going to work through it for an hour, and then I'll cut the video off and finish up with a second video. I'm not sure how much I'll get through. We can see that the title given to this book is The Acts of Diomed, or Diomedes, one of the Greek soldiers. He's called by some the second Achilles. He's sort of the next in line as the greatest of the Greek warriors behind Achilles, and he is the son of Tydeus, or Tydeus in Greek. Might even be pronounced Tydeus. I'm not sure off the top of my head which of those syllables is accented, but we're going to see this name Tydides, and Tydides, or Tudides, that's simply another name for Diomedes or Diomed. I'm sorry, the names get very confusing because we've got Greek forms of these names, we've got Latinized forms of these names, then we've got Anglicized versions of these names. So it's always a challenge to keep the names together, but Tudides or Tudides is the son of Tydeus. And that is that's just the patronym, or the name of the father of Diomedes or Diomed. Okay, so keep those two names together, and let's read together Book 5 of Homer's Iliad, the Acts of Diomed, the second Achilles, or the next greatest Greek warrior. Let's read together. But Pallas, that is Minerva or Athena, Pallas now Tydides' soul inspires, fills with her force and warms with all her fires, above the Greeks his deathless fame to raise, and crown her hero with distinguished praise. High on his helm celestial lightnings play, his beamy shield emits a living ray. The unwearied blaze incessant streams supplies, like the red star, notice the simile, like the red star that fires the autumnal skies. When fresh he rears his radiant orb to sight, and bathed in ocean shoots a keener light, this is talking about the red star. Such glories Pallas on the chief bestowed, such from his arms the fierce effulgence glowed. Onward she drives him, furious to engage, where the fight burns and where the thickest rage. Notice how I pronounce the word "the" here. I emphasize it for the sake of the meter, and here I don't emphasize it. Listen to that again. Where the fight burns and where the thickest rage. So remember the meter in this poetry, and you've got to learn to adjust the reading, adjust the emphasis on different words and syllables to fit what we know to be the meter. The sons of Dares first the combat sought, a wealthy priest, but rich without a fault. In other words, virtuously wealthy, not some kind of crook or schemer. In Vulcan's fane the fathers' days were led, the sons to toils of glorious battle bred. These singled from their troops the fight maintain, these from their steeds Tydides on the plain. Fierce for renown, the brother chiefs draw near, and first bold Phegeus cast his sounding spear, which o'er the warrior's shoulder took its course, and spent in empty air its erring force. In other words, he missed. Not so Tydides, flew thy lance in vain, but pierced his breast, and stretched him on the plain. Seized with unusual fear, Idaeus fled, left the rich chariot and his brother dead. And remember, Tydides refers to Diomed. He's a Greek soldier, so these men he's killing here are all Trojans. It's going to be important in just a minute. Left the rich chariot and his brother dead. And had not Vulcan lent celestial aid, he too had sunk to death's eternal shade. But in a smoky cloud the god of fire preserved the son in pity to the sire for the father's sake. The steeds and chariot to the navy led, increased the spoils of gallant Diomed. Struck with amaze and shame the Trojan crew, or slain or fled. Notice this double use of or here. That's an expression. It's the same as we would use for either or. Struck with amaze and shame the Trojan crew, or slain or fled, either slain or fled, whether slain or fled, the sons of Dares view, when by the blood-stained hand Minerva pressed, the god of battles, and this speech addressed. Stern power of war, by whom the mighty fall, who bathe in blood and shake the lofty wall, let thee, brave chiefs, their glorious toils divide, and whose the conquest, mighty Jove decide. While we from interdicted fields retire, nor tempt the wrath of heaven's avenging sire. Her words, that is Minerva's, her words allay the impetuous warrior's heat, the god of arms and martial maid retreat. Removed from fight on Xanthus' flowery bounds, they sat and listened to the dying sounds. Meantime, the Greeks and Trojan race pursue, and some bold chieftain every leader slew. Notice the use of the conjunction meantime. I think it's a conjunction. I don't think it's an adverb. But you can see the difficulty here. This is one of the things we discuss in English composition. The difficulty of narrating an event where there's multiple things going on at the same time and being able to tell a part of the story, then back up and narrate a different part, then return to the other part and go back and forth. We can see Homer doing that in this story, and again, this is a translation, but pay attention to the technique of the writer, how he accomplishes these difficult tasks of narrating this complex battle with fights broken out all over the plain, all different things going on, Trojans, Greeks, gods, goddesses, all interacting, and he continues to narrate the story in a simple way that's easy to follow and understand. That's the skill of Homer. Meantime, the Greeks and Trojan race pursue, and some bold chieftain every leader slew. First Odius falls and bites the bloody sand, his death ennobled by Atrides' hand. In other words, he died in fighting a great opponent, so his death is considered noble. As he to flight his wheeling car addressed, the speedy javelins drove from back to breast. In other words, he was struck in the back by a javelin that went through him and came out his chest. In dust the mighty Halizonian lay, his arms resound, the spirit wings its way. Notice the doctrine of man as body and soul. When the man dies, his spirit leaves his body. That's a look into Greek philosophy, Greek religion. Thy fate was next, O Phaestus, doomed to feel the great Idomeneus' protended steel, whom Borus sent his son and only joy from fruitful Tarne to the fields of Troy. The Cretan javelin reached him from afar and pierced his shoulder as he mounts his car or chariot. Back from the car he tumbles to the ground, and everlasting shades, spirits his eyes surround. Then died Scamandrius, expert in the chase, in woods and wilds to wound the savage race. Diana taught him all her sylvan arts, to bend the bow and aim unerring darts. Diana is the goddess of the forest. This adjective sylvan refers to the forest, so sylvan arts would be the arts of hunting by bow and arrow in the forest. Diana taught him all her sylvan arts, to bend the bow and aim unerring darts. But vainly here Diana's arts he tries. The fatal lance arrests him as he flies. To arrest means to take hold of. From Menelaus's arm the weapon sent through his broad back and heaving bosom went. Down sinks the warrior with a thundering sound, his brazen armor rings against the ground. Next artful Phereclus untimely fell, bold Meryon sent him to the realms of hell. Thy father's skill, O Phereclus, was thine, the graceful fabric and the fair design. For loved by Pallas, again that's Minerva or Athena, Pallas did impart to him the shipwrights and the builder's art. Note here a note about religion and philosophy. In the ancient world, remember, Homer was writing 750 years before Christ, so before the time of Pythagoras. Pythagoras was the one who really developed the philosophical idea of wisdom. Athena is the goddess of wisdom, but in the ancient world, before Pythagoras, wisdom included any kind of knowledge or skill. So notice that the goddess of wisdom gave to him the shipbuilder's art, knowledge of the art of shipbuilding. So when a man was known who was extremely talented in a certain craft, it was believed that the gods actually gave to him that wisdom, which gave him that extraordinary skill in that art. That's what wisdom meant in the ancient world before Pythagoras. Wisdom was any kind of great knowledge or skill. It was considered wisdom, a gift from the gods. Beneath his hand, the fleet of Paris rose. That means he built all the ships which were the fatal cause of all his country's woes. But he, the mystic will of heaven unknown, nor saw his country's peril nor his own. Here we have nor and nor, that means neither nor. Neither saw his country's peril nor his own. In other words, he built those ships for good reason. He didn't understand the evil purpose that they would serve or that they would bring down his whole nation. Nor saw his country's peril nor his own. The hapless or unfortunate artist, while confused, he fled. The spear of Meryon mingled with the dead. Through his right hip with forceful fury cast, between the bladder and the bone it passed. Prone on his knees, he falls with fruitless cries, and death in lasting slumbers seals his eyes. From Meges' force the swift Pedaeus fled, Antenor's offspring from a foreign bed, whose generous spouse, Theanor, heavenly fair, nursed the young stranger with a mother's care. How vain those cares! How vain the care that mothers invest in their children only to have them end up in war. How vain those motherly cares when Meges in the rear full in his nape infixed the fatal spear. Swift through his crackling jaws the weapon glides, and the cold tongue and grinning teeth divides. Then died Hypsenor, generous and divine, sprung from the brave Dolopian's mighty line, who near adored Scamander made abode, priest of the stream and honored as a god. On him amidst the flying numbers found, Eurypylus inflicts a deadly wound. Another example of a written rhyme that doesn't actually sound as a rhyme. There's a name for that I haven't been able to think of off the top of my head as we've been reading. Someone can look that up and add a comment to the video. On his broad shoulders fell the forceful brand, thence glancing downwards lopped his holy hand, which stained with sacred blood the blushing sand. Notice 3 lines rhyming there. Down sunk the priest, the purple hand of death closed his dim eye, and fate suppressed his breath. Thus toiled the chiefs, in different parts engaged, in every quarter fierce Tydides raged. Amid the Greek, amid the Trojan train, wrapped through the ranks, he thunders o'er the plain. Now here, now there, he darts from place to place, pours on the rear or lightens to the face, chases them from behind and sometimes face to face. Thus from high hills the torrents, swift and strong, deluge whole fields, flood whole fields, and sweep the trees along, the army moving. I think he's speaking of the army moving like a flood. Through ruined moles and the rushing wave resounds, o'erwhelms the bridge and bursts the lofty bounds. The yellow harvests of the ripened year and flatted vineyards one sad waste appear. In other words, the field all ready for harvest, full of crops, is just trampled by the warring soldiers. The vineyards are flattened by the fighting and destruction, one sad waste appear. While Jove descends, this is a big deal, Jupiter descends in sluicy sheets of rain, and all the labors of mankind are vain. All the labors of mankind are dependent upon the gods, the weather. So raged Tydides, boundless in his ire, unlimited was his fury. Drove armies back and made all Troy retire. With grief the leader of the Lycian band saw the wide waste of his destructive hand. He bended bow against the chief he drew. Swift to the mark the thirsty arrow flew. That's an example of personification. Whose forky point the hollow breastplate tore, deep in his shoulder pierced and drank the gore. The rushing stream his brazen armor dyed, while the proud archer thus exulting cried, Hither, ye Trojans, come here, ye Trojans, come drive your steeds, lo, by our hand the bravest Grecian bleeds. So Diomed here is struck with an arrow. Not long the dreadful dart he can sustain, or Phoebus urged me to these fields in vain. So spoke he, boastful, but the winged dart stopped short of life, and mocked the shooter's art. So it appeared to be a mortal wound, but actually it wasn't. The wounded chief Diomed, behind his car, retired, the helping hand of Sthenelus required. Swift from his seat he leaped upon the ground, and tugged the weapon from the gushing wound. When thus the king his guardian power addressed, the purple current wandering o'er his vest. O progeny of Jove, unconquered maid, if e'er my godlike sire deserved thy aid. So he's speaking here, looks like he's speaking to Minerva. If e'er my godlike sire deserved thy aid, if e'er I felt thee in the fighting field, now, goddess, now thy sacred succor yield. Give me your divine assistance. He's praying for help. Give my lance to reach the Trojan knight, whose arrow wounds the chief thou guard'st in fight, and lay that boaster groveling on the shore, that vaunts these eyes shall view the light no more. Now notice calling the help of the gods against one who boasts. There's a word that's used to describe arrogance in Greek literature called hubris. Hybris. This man is an example of hubris, and so Diomed prays that the gods would see this boasting and give him success to cast his lance or javelin. and kill the man who shot him. Thus prayed Tydides, and Minerva heard. His nerves confirmed, his languid spirits cheered. Notice she gives him strength. This is the idea of grace in the Christian faith. He feels each limb with wonted vigor light. His beating bosom claimed the promised fight. Be bold, she cried. In every combat shine. War be thy province, thy protection mine. So Athena tells Diomed, you just fight and you leave the results to me. Don't worry about yourself. Don't worry about your safety. You just war. War is your province. War is your department. Your protection is my business. Rush to the fight. Every foe control. Wake each paternal virtue in thy soul. Strength swells thy boiling breast, infused by me. Infused means put in. So she's saying that strength, he's filled with strength that she actually gives to him. That's the idea of infused grace, which we talk about in Christianity. And all thy godlike Father breathes in thee, yet more from mortal mists I purge thy eyes and set to view the warring deities. So she gives him the ability to see the actions and involvement of the gods and goddesses in the battle. I give you, she says, the ability to see the warring deities. These see thou shun. In other words, you see the gods and goddesses engaged in the fighting. You see them, they're here in the midst of the battle. See that you don't do anything disrespectful to them. These see thou shun. Through all the embattled plain, nor rashly strive where human force is vain. Don't you dare take up an arm against one of the gods. Think about Jacob wrestling the angel in the Old Testament. However, Minerva says, if Venus, that is the god of love, the god of beauty, Venus or Aphrodite, if Venus mingle in the martial band, if Venus, the goddess of love, makes her way down into the battle, her shalt thou wound. So Pallas, Athena, Minerva gives command. So Diomed is told that he should not act disrespectfully towards any of the gods or goddesses that he sees in the battlefield, but if it's Venus, he's free to go ahead and strike her. With that, the blue-eyed virgin, that's Athena, the blue-eyed virgin winged her flight. The hero rushed impetuous to the fight. With tenfold ardor, 10 times the zeal or strength, now he invades the plain, wild with delay, and more enraged by pain. As on the fleecy flock, so here we have a simile, a comparison. As on the fleecy flocks, when hunger calls, amid the field a brindled lion falls. If chance some shepherd with a distant dart the savage wound, he rouses at the smart. So we're given this illustration here of a time where a shepherd is out with his sheep and a hungry lion appears and wants to kill them. And so the shepherd draws his bow, fires and strikes the lion with an arrow. The lion then is filled with pain, just as Diomed has been. Amidst the field a brindled lion falls. If chance some shepherd with a distant dart the savage wound, he rouses at the smart, that means the pain. He foams, the lion, he roars. The shepherd dares not stay, but trembling leaves the scattering flocks a prey. He runs for his life. Heaps fall on heaps. In other words, the lion just tears the whole flock apart. He bathes with blood the ground, then leaps victorious o'er the lofty mound. And so like the lion, not with less fury, stern Tydides flew, and 2 brave leaders at an instant slew. Astinous, notice the 2 dots above the U, that's called a diaresis or diaresis. That tells us that this should be pronounced as 2 syllables. Astinous. Astinous breathless fell, and by his side his people's pastor, that's not a religious term, that just means a shepherd. His people's pastor, one who takes care of the people, good Hypenor, died. Astinous' breast the deadly lance receives, Hypenor's shoulder his broad falchion cleaves. Falchion is a sword. Those slain he left, and sprung with noble rage Abbas and Polyidus, another Diaresis, Abbas and Polyidus to engage, sons of Eurydamus, who wise and old could fate foresee, a future teller, a fortune teller, could foresee fate and mystic dreams unfold. The youths returned not from the doubtful plain, the youths returned not from the doubtful plain, and the sad father tried his arts in vain. No mystic dream could make their fates appear, though now determined by Tydides' spear. Young Xanthus next, and Thoon felt his rage, the joy and hope of Phaenops' feeble age. Vast was his wealth, and these the only heirs of all his labors and a life of cares. How vain! We saw before the mother's care, all in vain when war begins. And here we see the father's provision, the father working, laboring to build wealth for his sons, and these his only heirs are now killed in the battle. All his labors, a life of cares, wasted in a moment. Cold death o'ertakes them in their blooming years, and leaves the father unavailing tears. To strangers now descends his heapy store, the race forgotten, and his name no more. Two sons of Priam in one chariot ride, glittering in arms and combat side by side, simile, as when the lordly lion seeks his food, where grazing heifers range the lonely wood. Heifers are female cows, young cows that haven't had calves yet. He leaps amidst them with a furious bound, bends their strong necks and tears them to the ground. So in the same way, from their seats the brother chiefs are torn, their steeds and chariot to the navy borne. In other words, Diomed defeats them, takes their horses and chariot to the ship as his plunder, takes them back to his ship. With deep concern, now this is important, with deep concern divine Aeneas viewed. So here we have again a reference to Aeneas, and Aeneas is very important because later on in this course, we're going to read Virgil's Aeneid, which is the story of what happens to Aeneas after the Trojan War comes to an end, when Troy is destroyed. So any information that we can gather about Aeneas from Homer is very helpful in reading and understanding Virgil. So here we have a passage about Aeneas that's important for us to keep in mind and remember later on. So remember that Aeneas is discussed again in Book 5 of the Iliad here. With deep concern, divine Aeneas viewed the foe prevailing and his friends being pursued. He sees his Trojans losing. Through the thick storm of singing spears he flies, exploring Pandaros with careful eyes. At length he found Lycaon's mighty son, to whom the chief of Venus's race begun. So this is Aeneas speaking. Where, Pandaros, are all thy honors now, thy winged arrows and unerring bow, thy matchless skill and yet unrivaled fame, and boasted glory of Lycian name? O pierce that mortal, if we mortal call, that wondrous force by which whole armies fall, or God incensed who quits the distant skies to punish Troy for flighted sacrifice. Which, O, avert from our unhappy state, for what so dreadful as celestial hate? What is more terrible, he says, than to be hated by the gods? Whoe'er he be, propitiate Jove with prayer. If man, destroy. If God, entreat to spare. To him the Lycian said, Whom your eyes behold, if right I judge, is Diomed the bold. Such coursers whirl him o'er the dusty field, so towers his helmet, and so flames his shield. If 'tis a god, he wears that chief's disguise. So Diomed is so terrifying they can't even tell whether it's a man or a god. If 'tis a god, he wears that man's disguise, or if that chief, some guardian of the skies, involved in clouds, protects him in the fray. He's got divine protection, it seems. And he turns unseen the frustrated dart away. The gods are protecting him. I winged an arrow, which not idly fell. The stroke had fixed him to the gates of hell. But some god, some angry god withstand. Some angry god got in the way of my arrow. His fate was due to these unerring hands. Skilled in the bow, on foot I sought the war, nor joined swift horses to the rapid car. 10 polished chariots I possessed at home, and still they grace Lycaon's princely dome. There veiled in spacious coverlets they stand, and twice 10 coursers wait their lord's commands. I have 20 war horses at home, but I came here on foot to fight. The good old warrior bade me trust to these, when first for Troy I sailed the sacred seas. There's an example for figures of speech for alliteration. When first for Troy I sailed the sacred seas. In fields aloft the whirling car to guide, and through the ranks of death triumphant ride, but vain with youth, and yet to thrift inclined, I heard his counsels with unheedful mind, and thought the steeds, your large supplies unknown, might fail of forage in the straitened town. So took my bow and pointed darts in hand, and left the chariots in my native land. Too late, O friend, my rashness I deplore. These shafts once fatal carry death no more. Tydeus's and Atreus's sons their points have found, and undissembled gore pursued the wound. In vain they bleed. This unavailing bow serves not to slaughter but provoke the foe. So they're saying that the gods seem to be helping the Greeks. We strike them with our weapons and they seem to have no effect. All they do is make the Greeks angrier. Our weapon serves not to slaughter but to provoke the foe, just to make them even angrier. In evil hour these bended horns I strung, and seized the quiver where it idly hung. Cursed be the fate that sent me to the field without a warrior's arms, the spear and shield. If e'er with life I quit the Trojan plain, if I ever get out of here alive, if e'er I see my spouse and sire, my wife and father again, this bow, unfaithful to my glorious aims, broke by my hand shall feed the blazing flames. To whom the leader of the Dardan race said, Be calm, nor Phoebus' honored gift disgrace. Phoebus is the god of the sun, Apollo, who gives the gift of archery. He's the great archer. Be calm, nor Phoebus' honored gift disgrace. Don't be careful how you talk about the gift that you've been given. Don't be arrogant. Remember the fable in Aesop. If you've studied Aesop's fables, remember the fable of Jupiter and the camel, where the camel complains. And we're told the camel is unthoughtful. Here we're told, be careful. Be calm, nor Phoebus' honored gift disgrace. The distant dart be praised, though here we need the rushing chariot and the bounding steed. Against yon hero let us bend our course, and hand to hand encounter force with force. So he says, look, your arrows aren't going to do any good, so get on this chariot with me and we'll fight him together. The rushing chariot and the boundless and the bounding steed, against yon hero let us bend our course, and hand to hand encounter force with force. Now mount my seat, and from the chariot's height observe my father's steeds renowned in fight. Practiced alike to turn, to stop, to chase, to dare the shock or urge the rapid race. Secure with these, through fighting fields we go, or safe to Troy if Jove assist the foe. So the chariots help us to fight if we're in the battlefield, and if things go badly and we're forced to retreat, the chariots and horses allow us to get out of here quickly. Secure with these, through fighting fields we go, or safe to Troy if Jove assist the foe. Haste, seize the whip and snatch the guiding rein. The warrior's fury let this arm sustain. Or if to combat thy bolt hard incline, take thou the spear, the chariot's care be mine. So one of us has to drive, one of us has to throw the spear. O Prince, Lycaon's valiant son replied, as thine the steeds, be thy the task to guide. They're your horses, you drive them. The horses, practiced to their lord's command, shall bear the rein and answer to thy hand. But if unhappy we desert the fight, thy voice alone can animate their flight. Else shall our fates be numbered with the dead, and these, the victor's prize, in triumph led. So let's use these horses, or else they're going to end up being taken as the enemy's spoils. And these, the victor's prize, in triumph led. Thine be the guidance, then, with spear and shield, myself will charge this terror of the field. And now both heroes mount the glittering car, the bounding coursers rush amidst the war. Their fierce approach bold Sthenelus espied, with who thus alarmed to great Tydides cried. So these two men are coming after Tydides, and he's warned by Sthenelus. O friend, two chiefs of force immense I see, dreadful they come and bend their rage on thee. Lo, thee brave heir of old Lycaon's line, and great Aeneas sprung from race divine. So here we learn that Aeneas was believed to have been born of the gods. Enough is given to fame, ascend the car, and save thy life, the bulwark of our war. At this the hero cast a gloomy look, fixed on the chief with scorn, and thus he spoke. Me dost thou bid to shun the coming fight? Me wouldst thou move to base inglorious flight? No, 'tis not honest in my soul to fear, nor was Tydides born to tremble here. I hate the cumbrous chariot's slow advance, and the long distance of the flying lance. But while my nerves are strong, my force entire, thus front the foe and emulate my sire. Nor shall yon steeds, nor shall your horses that fierce to fight convey, those threatening heroes bear them both away. One chief at least beneath this arm shall die, so Pallas tells me, and forbids me to fly. But if she dooms, and if no god withstand, that both shall fall by one victorious hand, then heed my words, my horses, here detain, fixed to the chariot by the straitened rein. Swift to Aeneas's empty seat proceed, and seize the coursers of ethereal or heavenly breed. The race of those which once a thundering god for ravished Ganymede on Tros bestowed, the best that e'er on earth's broad surface run, beneath the rising or the setting sun, in east or west. Hence great Anchises, that's the father of Aeneas, Anchises or Anchises. Hence great Anchises stole a breed unknown by mortal mares from fierce Laomedon. 4 of this race his ample stalls contain, and 2 transport Aeneas o'er all the plain. These were the rich immortal prize our own, through the wide world should make our glory known. And thus, while they spoke, the foam came furious on, and stern Lycaon's warlike race begun. So here we read that Aeneas faces Diomed, but Aeneas is accompanied on his chariot by a fellow Trojan. Prince, thou art met. Though late in vain assailed, the spear may enter where the arrow failed. He spoke, then shook the ponderous lance and flung on his broad shield the sounding weapon rung. Pierced the tough orb, pierced through the shield. Orb means a circle. And in his cuirass hung. Cuirass is the upper body armor that they wore that covered their chest and their back. He bleeds. The pride of Greece, the boaster cries. Notice how it repeats that he's boastful. Our triumph now, the mighty warrior lies. So Aeneas and his partner think that they've got Diomed, which would be a very glorious victory for them. But Diomed replies, mistaken vaunter, Diomed replied, thy dart has erred, you missed, and now my spear will be tried. Ye escape not both. Both of you are not going to get away, only one. One of you, headlong from this car, with hostile blood shall glut the god of war. I'm going to offer one of you up to Mars. He spoke, Diomed spoke, and rising hurled his forceful dart, which, driven by Pallas, pierced a vital part. Full in his face it entered. So the man who was boastful got a javelin right in his face. Full in his face it entered, and betwixt the nose and eyeball the proud Lycian fixed, crashed all his jaws, and cleft his tongue within, till the bright point of the spear looked out beneath his chin. Headlong he falls, his helmet knocks the ground, earth groans beneath him, and his arms resound. The starting coursers, the frightened horses, tremble with affright. The soul indignant seeks the realms of night. To guard his slaughtered friend Aeneas flies, his spear extending where the carcass lies. Watchful he wheels, protects it every way, as a grim lion stalks around his prey. O'er the fallen trunk his ample shield displayed, he hides the hero with his mighty shade, and threats aloud the Greeks with longing eyes, behold at distance, but forbear the prize. Then fierce Tydides stoops, and from the fields, heaved with vast force, a rocky fragment wields. Not two strong men the enormous weight could raise, such men as live in these degenerate days. Notice, people always think that their generation is worse than the past. He swung it round, and gathering strength to throw, discharged the ponderous ruin at the foe, where to the hip the inserted thigh unites, full on the bone the pointed marble lights. Through both the tendons broke the rugged stone, and stripped the skin and cracked the solid bone. Sunk on his knees, and staggering with his pains, his falling bulk his bended arm sustains. Lost in a dizzy mist the warrior lies. A sudden cloud comes swimming o'er his eyes. So Aeneas is in trouble. And all of a sudden cloud comes swimming o'er his eyes. And there the brave chief, who mighty numbers swayed, oppressed, had sunk to death's eternal shade, except heavenly Venus. Remember that Athena told Diomed that he should be careful not to strike any of the gods or goddesses, but that he could strike Venus. Well, here Venus enters. Venus loves Aeneas, and so she comes to rescue Aeneas the Trojan. But heavenly Venus, mindful of the love she bore Anchises, the father of Aeneas, in the Idaean grove, his danger views with anguish and despair, and guards her offspring with a mother's care. So Venus comes to protect Aeneas and save him from Diomed. About her much-loved son her arms she throws, her arms whose whiteness match the falling snows. Screened from the foe, hidden from the enemy, behind her shining veil, the swords wave harmless and the javelins fail. Safe through the rushing horse and feathered flight of sounding shafts, she bears him from the fight, carries him away from battle. Nor Sthenelus, with unassisting hands, remained unheedful of his lord's commands. His panting steeds removed from out the war, he fixed with straitened traces to the car. Next, rushing to the Dardan spoil, detains the heavenly coursers with the flowing manes. These in proud triumph to the fleet conveyed as spoil. No longer now do these horses a Trojan lord obey. They're in Greek control now. That charge to bold Deipylus he gave, whom most he loved, as brave men love the brave. Then mounting on his car resumed the rein and followed where Tydides swept the plain. Meanwhile, his conquest ravished from his eyes. In other words, Tydides was excited about the prospect of killing Aeneas, but now he sees his conquest taken away from his eyes, made invisible by Venus and carried out of battle. His conquest ravished from his eyes, the raging chief in chase of Venus flies. So we have this very interesting scene where a man, Diomed, is actually chasing Venus, a goddess. No goddess she, commissioned to the field, like Pallas dreadful with her sable shield, or fierce Bellona thundering at the wall, while flames ascend and mighty ruins fall. He knew soft combats suit the tender dame, new to the field and still a foe to fame. So in other words, Venus, being a goddess of beauty, has no place on the battlefield. Not appropriate for her to be there, and Diomed knows that. Through breaking ranks his furious course he bends, and at the goddess his broad lance extends. So he actually threatens Venus, Diomed. Through her bright veil the daring weapon drove, the ambrosial veil which all the Graces wove. Her snowy hand the raising steel of Diomed profaned, and the transparent skin, white and soft skin, the transparent skin with crimson stained, from the clear vein a stream immortal flowed, such a stream as issues from a wounded god. So Diomed actually wounds Venus with his spear. Pure emanation, uncorrupted flood, unlike our gross diseased terrestrial blood. So she has divine blood in her veins. It's not like our blood. For not the bread of man their life sustains, nor wine's inflaming juice supplies their veins. The gods don't eat and drink as we do, therefore their blood is unlike ours. With tender shrieks the goddess filled the place, and dropped her offspring from her weak embrace. She dropped Aeneas. Notice it teaches us that Venus was actually the mother of Aeneas. Him, that is Aeneas, Phoebus took. He casts a cloud around the fainting chief and wards the mortal wound. Then with a voice that shook the vaulted skies, the king insults the goddess as she flies. So it sounds like Diomed is now taunting Venus, the goddess. Ill with Jove's daughter, bloody fights agree. In other words, the battlefield is no place for you, woman, or goddess, I should say. The field of combat is no scene for thee. Go, let thy own soft sex employ the care. Go, lull the coward or delude the fair. That's what women do, he says. He says women, they don't belong in battle. They lull the coward and delude the beautiful, the handsome. Taught by this stroke, renounce the war's alarms and learn to tremble at the names of arms. In other words, Diomed tells Venus, you better get out of here because I can injure you, and here's a little sign of that. I'll strike you with my spear and cut your hand open. Tydides spoke thus, the goddess, seized with dread, terrified, confused, distracted from the conflict, she fled. To aid her, to help her, swift, the winged Iris, the goddess of the rainbow. To aid her, swift, the winged Iris flew, wrapped in a mist above the warring crew. The queen of love with faded charms she found, pale was her cheek, and livid looked the wound. To Mars, the god of battle, who sat remote, they bent their way. Far on the left, with clouds involved, he lay. Beside him stood his lance, disdained with gore, and rained with gold his foaming steeds before. Lo, at his knee she begged with streaming eyes her brother's car to mount the distant skies. So here the goddess Venus comes to Apollo and begs him to help her. She showed him the wound by fierce Tydides given, a mortal man who dares encounter heaven. Stern Mars, attentive, hears the queen complain, and to her hand commits the golden rein. She mounts the seat, oppressed with silent woe, driven by the goddess of the painted bow. The lash resounds, the rapid chariot flies, and in a moment scales the lofty skies. They stopped the car, and there the coursers stood, fed by fair Iris with ambrosial food. Before her mother, love's bright queen appears, o'erwhelmed with anguish and dissolved in tears. She raised her in her arms, beheld her bleed, and asked what god had wrought this guilty deed. Then she spoke, Venus, this insult from no god I found, an impious mortal gave the daring wound. Behold the deed of haughty Diomed, 'twas in the son's defense the mother bled. I was protecting my son Aeneas, and Diomed struck me and caused me to bleed. The war with Troy no more the Grecians wage, but with the gods, the immortal gods engage. The Greeks are not going to be content with Troy. They're going to come for us, the gods. Dione, then, thy wrongs with patience bear, and share those griefs inferior powers must share. Unnumbered woes mankind from us sustain, and men with woes afflict the gods again. The mighty Mars in mortal fetters bound, and lodged in brazen dungeons underground. Full 13 moons imprisoned roared in vain. Otus and Ephialtes held the chain. Perhaps had perished had not Hermes care, Hermes the god, the messenger, restored the groaning god to upper air. Great Juno's self has borne her weight of pain, the imperial partner of the heavenly reign. Amphitrion's son infixed the deadly dart, and filled with anguish her immortal heart. Even hell's grim king Alcides' power confessed, the shaft found entrance in his iron breast. To Jove's high palace for a cure he fled, pierced in his own dominions of the dead, where Pion, sprinkling heavenly balm around, assuaged the glowing pangs and closed the wound. Rash, impious man, to stain the blessed abodes, and drench his arrows in the blood of gods. But thou, though Pallas urged thy frantic deed, though we understand that you were told to do this by Athena, whose spear ill-fated makes a goddess breed, know thou, whoe'er with heavenly power contends, short is his date, and soon his glory ends. Those who challenge the gods, those who put gods to the test, they don't live long. Short is his date, and soon his glory ends. From fields of death, when late he shall retire, no infant on his knees shall call him sire. Such as strong as thou art. I'm sorry if I mispronounce some words. It's late here and I'm tired. Strong as thou art, some god may yet be found to stretch thee pale and gasping on the ground. Thy distant wife, Aegiale the fair, starting from sleep with a distracted air, shall rouse thy slaves and her lost lord deplore, the brave, the great, the glorious now no more. This said, she wiped from Venus's wounded palm the sacred ichor. That word there, ichor, is the name for the blood of the gods, ichor. And she infused the balm. Juno and Pallas with a smile surveyed, and thus to Jove began the blue-eyed maid, Athena. Permit thy daughter, gracious Jove, to tell how this mischance the Cyprian queen befell. As late she tried with passion to inflame the tender bosom of a Grecian dame, allured the fair with moving thoughts of joy to quit her country for some youth of Troy. The clasping zone with golden buckles bound raised her soft hand. Raised means burned or injured. Raised her soft hand with this lamented wound. The sire of gods and men superior smiled, and calling Venus, thus addressed the child. Not these, O daughter, are thy proper cares. Thee milder arts befit, and softer wars. Sweet smiles are thine, and kind endearing charms. To Mars and Pallas leave the deeds of arms. Venus, you need to stay in your own lane. Leave the war for Mars and Pallas. That's none of your business. Thus they spoke in heaven. While on the plain below the fierce Tydides charged his Dardan foe, flushed with celestial blood pursued his way, and fearless dared the threatening god of day. Already in his hopes he saw him killed, though screened behind Apollo's mighty shield. Thrice rushing furious at the chief he struck. His blazing buckler thrice Apollo shook. He tried the fourth, when breaking from the cloud a more than mortal voice was heard aloud. O son of Tydeus, cease! Be wise and see how vast the difference of the gods and thee. Distance immense between the powers that shine above, eternal, deathless, and divine. A mortal man, a wretch of humble birth, a short-lived reptile in the dust of earth. I'm going to stop there since we're approaching 1 hour. We're at 59 minutes right now. So we're stopping in the midst of this scene after Diomed has injured Venus, and Venus is being told, counseled by the gods, not to mess with battle scenes, but to stay in places where gentler arts are practiced and leave the battlefields to the warriors and to the gods of battle. I hope that's helpful. We're about halfway through, and in the next video we'll finish Book 5. So I'll catch you on that second video. God bless.